So I'm looking at an updated V1-1 version of the rules for the Incredible Courage series, basically Napoleonic tactics at the company scale. Probably risky to say much before, having played a single turn, but I will say one thing before I take a look at some of the fire rules. I was thinking, comparing the tiny bit that I've seen of Incredible Courage here with the La Bataille Premier rules that I was looking at recently, and I am thinking, at least on paper, I think it looks a lot better to have company scale at 100-meter hexes, but we'll see. But I think that a company scale at 100-meter hexes might actually be better than battalion scale at 200 or 250-meter hexes. All right, so operations step. Now the owning player carries out operations for the units of each activated force, one force at a time. So again, it is, so to speak, formation by formation actions. And for each force, the player is going to go through command control check, movement and fire combat, and melee combat. Alright, so that's an example. Well, actually, let's look at this. A player successfully activates Force 1 and Force 2. There are rules above about defining a force, though, that I didn't obviously look at yet. He decides to deal with Force 2 first. He does the command control checks for Force 2. Then he completes its movement and fire combat, and finally its melee combat. Then he does the same force. That's how I thought it was going to be. The activated force's combat units may perform fire combat, or move, may perform fire combat, or move and then perform fire combat after receiving and remaining after defensive fire. The activated force's non-combat units, such as HQs, may move. Combat units of a force do not have to all fire or all move. Some units may move while others fire, and vice versa. After completing the activated force's fire combat and movement, resolve any melee combat. Disorder. Artillery is not forced to disorder from the effects of fire combat against it. Artillery is reduced in level of organization due to fire combat to LO01, but not lower. Okay. OCC units in combat. Alright. Column. The formations here. So we have column for both infantry and cavalry. Changing formation and or facing is considered movement for the purposes of defensive fire. That would make sense. In battery and out of battery for artillery. An artillery unit which is in battery may fire. Makes sense, but may not move except to change facing or formation. Makes sense. An artillery unit which changes facing may not fire in the current operation step. I think that has to do with the 10-minute per turn time scale, which makes sense. An artillery unit which is out of battery may move or change facing or formation, but it may not fire. You see, more and more I'm seeing this scale might be right. This scale might actually be right. Now, does it make for an incredible, over-the-top experience of fighting a battle like Waterloo? Sure. But for the play experience from turn to turn, I think this scale might be better. Any units that start adjacent to the skirmisher may move into the skirmisher's hex up to the stacking limit, and any defensive fire on that hex's frontal hex faces have the results reduced by 1 LOO. Not sure what that's about. Defensive fire is conducted against a column. Oh, this is an example. Okay. Well, let's see. Defensive fire is conducted against a column since the unit moving are in column. Yeah, okay. There's defensive fire against hex E, in the center there. Defensive fire from hex B. Okay, these are, yeah. The red units up there in hexes A, B, and C are, looks like they're infantry in line formation. From hex B to hex E is 1 LOO less than what is called for. Okay, defensive fire from hex C is less than what is called for. Okay, defensive fire from hex A to E is normal. Okay. Form square. If the infantry form square, they may use defensive fire on the charging cavalry when the cavalry moves adjacent. If the target successfully stands, it may, if otherwise eligible, conduct defensive fire on the charging cavalry unit. So we got very similar to my look at the PME La Bataille rules recently. We have standing and forming square and defensive fire and charging cavalry line of sight. For example, in fire combat, the line of sight is drawn from the fire's hex to target's hex. Obviously. Combat units attack enemy combat units using 2 types of combat.